Cliff, how the hell you doing, bud? How's life treating you?
I'm good. I'm good. I can't complain. I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Love that, man. So we're gonna get into an interview today and just talk a little bit of your story. But what I want from you now is how you got into fitness and kind of what was the motivation there.
Yeah. So I've always been in shape playing sports in high school and basketball, high school and college. I played basketball in high school, and then I played for like a year and a half in college. And once I was like, I don't really know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I was kind of going to college for playing basketball, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So then I was like, I need to start figuring that out. And lifting weights just kind of became the replacement for basketball. I wanted something physical, and then quickly I realized I wanted something else to compete in that wasn't basketball. And bodybuilding was right there. And there's not a lot of sports you can really engage with at a high level once you are over college age.
Once you get
Oh,
past
do I
22, yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, do I want to play basketball? Great, I'll go to the YMCA. You know what I mean? Do I want to play other sports? Do I want to join a softball league? But bodybuilding, you can be a full-fledged adult and engage in a high level, and that really appealed to me. So I knew that I wanted to do bodybuilding almost within a month or two of picking up a weight. Now, my ability to be a great bodybuilder is a different story, but I was into it right away. And I didn't really care how good or, how bad I was going to be at it. I liked it and I was just going to go for it.
Yeah, that and people don't give you such a hard time when you're in your 30s getting bigger biceps. But like if you're in your 30s going after your vertical leap, people are gonna give you some side eyes. Like I've got questions for that guy.
That is true. The wife would probably be a little less forgiving, being like, "Oh, I got to go work on my jumper for 2 hours."
Curls for the girls, tries for the guys. I've heard.
Watch the kids, honey. I got to go work on my dribbling and post feed skills.
Hey man, it makes more sense to me.
Yeah,
All right, then where do we go from there? I mean, we had the motivation to
yeah,
want to get into bodybuilding to have something more, which that I think speaks the language of everyone that's ever gotten involved in working in fitness. Well, I got done doing this thing. Now what do I do? It's kind of
yeah,
that
yeah.
next chapter of the story.
Yeah, when you first pick up a weight, you really don't, I joke, but you really don't know how gifted or not gifted you're going to be, usually. It's like, you don't know if you have the ability to go far in this thing. You're feeling it out. Within a year or two of lifting weights, I realized I wasn't going to be Mr. Olympia, but I still wanted to go for it. But I realized I needed a little bit longer time to train before I did my first show than most people. So I took about 5 years from the time I really seriously started training to the time I stepped on stage for the first time. And I did my first show, and I was thin as expected, but I got pretty lean. I did a pretty big tested show, and I only did the novice division, but there were 12 guys in the novice division in my class, which is
Wow,
pretty good size novice class. Shows were a little bigger back. This was 2008. Shows were a little bigger back then.
less
There
shows,
were
more
12.
people showing up to them. That whole thing.
Exactly. Exactly. I was probably the skinniest one on stage, but I was probably the leanest. So I took second place out of the 12, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And funny enough, um, I didn't plan on being a coach, and I kind of fell into it. And after I took second place, there were a couple of guys at my gym that were interested in competing, and they were like, "Hey, I heard you just did a show. Can you help me?" Get to the stage. And I guess I wasn't even thinking of it as a job. All I noticed was they definitely had better genetics than myself. So I was curious what I could do with their physiques. And so I didn't even charge them. I was just like, I didn't know if I wasn't thinking of it as a job. I knew more than them. That's what I knew, first off. I knew more than them. I knew they had much better genetics. I was curious. And even though I'd been training for 5 years and only done one show, I was obsessive. I'm just going to be honest. Like right out of the gate, I did start to realize I didn't have the genetics that other people did. So I was kind of obsessed with trying to find better ways. This was everything from I wasn't in school, but I would purchase access to academic journals and just read every study I could get my hand on. I would look through Google, Scholar and Google book search and read limited access to whatever books I could get my hand on. I would also read what bodybuilders were doing, and I would try to like commingle these things, what the science says, what the bodybuilders were doing, what I saw working, and put it into my own kind of cohesive approach. And I was kind of excited to see what I could do. So I had two guys that asked me at the gym. I was like, let's just get you guys ready for a show. So the year after I did my first show ever, still only did one show. I had one client win Mr. Natural Illinois and another one take the runner up at that show.
Wow.
So
Okay,
after,
yeah, there's a lot
yeah,
of coaches out there that are going, that was not my first experience of my first season.
yeah, and
Nice.
it was a good time, and they did well, and I wasn't thinking of it as a job at that point. We were having fun with our little crew. We were like, okay, we're gonna have fun with this. But funny enough, Lane Norton was actually at that show, and Lane had already been coaching for a very long time, even in like 2009. He came up to me after the show because I think he had some clients in the show too, and he was super nice. He was like, "Man," he goes, "I don't see anybody else get striated glutes with their guys like that." He goes, "Except for me." He goes, "You could probably make a good living off of doing this if that's the kind of work you're doing."
That's
And then
right. Back then, you didn't get athletes that lean. Like the whole striated glutes or getting that feathering of the hamstring, all that was not
yeah,
as
no,
like
I
as
mean,
popular.
no, and, no, nobody had glutes in the show except for like my two guys. And so Lane was like, you could probably make a good living. And then honestly, I was like, it just didn't occur to me that it could be a job. Does that make sense? Because nobody was doing it. And then the other thing, the only people that were doing it had PhDs and master's degrees back then. There were like 4 or 5 guys that were doing this job full time, prep coaching, and they all had PhDs and master's degrees. And I was a college dropout. But then I was like, you know what? I'm good at this. I knew it right away. I was like, I think I'm good at this, and let's make a real go at making this a job. So that was like 2009, and then I just kept going for it, and within 2 years I was able to quit my job and start coaching full time.
Awesome. I like the whole journey of it, of just trying it out and seeing how it goes. I think most trainers generally have a background similar to it. Like we all think that there's some inspiration or passion that drove to it, but more often than not, it just starts with some guy in the weight room coming up to you in high school or college and going, "Hey man, you have a great bench. Mind helping me out?" And it just kind of evolves into this thing that you now have this great career. And I mean, just speaking about you, such a great reputation in the industry of just being a guy with consistent results. And it all stemmed from, yeah, sure, I can help you get in shape. Yeah, why not? Let's have some fun with it.
Yeah, well, and I think that was one thing, is that because so I didn't quit my full time job until I had to. You know what I mean? I was like, it was a make or break point. I have too many clients. There's not enough hours in the day. I mean, there was a point where I was working like 90-hour weeks for probably a year or more because I was doing my full time job and then I was coaching, and I was like, something's got to give. And I think that's also another problem where people quit their jobs too early. They have no other way of making money. And so everything hinges on their coaching. And the problem with that is when everything hinges on your coaching, your income, you will sacrifice your standards. Because when I was starting coaching, I had my full-time job that was paying my bills, and then I was cheap. I was charging $30 a month when I first started charging people. I was just like, whatever, because I was like, let's just get people. You know what I mean?
Let's get our repetitions in and get that
Yeah,
and screw up on a lower price point versus say screw up when someone's paying you like $1,000 a month in some cases.
yeah, and I was probably sometimes still am a little too blunt. I've gotten a little more tactful in my old age, but like in the early going, I didn't have to worry about the money because I was paying. I was pretty poor, but I was at least paying my bills with my day job. And then if I had somebody, even if they had all the physical talent in the world, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, I don't think we should do this, I don't think we should do that. I just kind of be like, you're not for me. I want people that want to win. You can
Suck
go.
it up,
You can go.
Buttercup. Get to work.
There are times where I would say things like, you can go be average with a different coach. You know what I mean? Like I don't want average competitors. You know what I mean? Like, and that doesn't mean out of ability, but I want somebody to get every bit out of their potential. You know what I mean? Like I'm a skinny guy, but I get the most out of my physique. And if you're a skinny guy or girl too, I want you to get the most out of your physique. You know what I mean? Like let's and I truly believe this. I think there are some coaches that are like good at being fun focused in the process, but and there's a certain point where it's like fun and results go hand in hand. But then towards the end of like prep and when you get to a higher level, they start to diverge a little bit.
It's a more suck than fun by far. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just be honest. I'm not the coach that's focused on fun. I think that also you could go to a different coach and he'll make the process more fun. That's not my specialty, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. And I think a lot of coaches sometimes expect their clients to want the progress the same way they want it. Like the old thing is you can't want progress more than your clients want progress.
Yeah,
And sometimes I find coaches, especially those that are so passionate and specifically detail oriented coach, that more type A right angle kind of guy, my God, can he not understand why 32 grams. What do you mean you put 34? It was supposed to be 32 grams. What's going on here?
So the funny thing is that I probably am more, I don't want to say the opposite of that, but not in that vein. Because first off, if somebody messes up, I can work with somebody that messes up but takes responsibility. You know what I mean? Hey, I cheated on my diet, but they're not like, looking at me to figure out how to go back in time and fix it. Or, you know what I mean? Like, if you can take responsibility, I can work with that. We'll get there eventually. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. Now, people not coming up after a bad weekend of just partying and going, what do you mean you can't undo the last 72 hours of binging?
Yeah, yeah. The thing that I would say I differ, and I still differ with this with a lot of because I get a lot of people that now come to me and they're pretty high athletes, maybe pro bodybuilders, but not like top tier pro or, mid-level or just turned pro. Sometimes they think I'm going to be that type A personality where I'm like tracking out every detail, this RPE for this set and this exact food. But I run my coaching process a little bit more individualized, where I try to build up the skill of the athlete as well. Because some bodybuilders want to operate in a system where they just like shut their brain off. Coach, tell me what to do, and I just, I do. Where I'm like, what sport in the world does the athlete get to turn their brain off? You know what I mean? Like, bodybuilding should be no different. It's like, you don't send LeBron James out there and LeBron James is like, Coach, when you want me to shoot, just shout shoot. You know what I mean? He's going to have to decide when to shoot. And so
you actually have to be a pro, actually be an athlete that competes, not just some guy that shows up for some mindless task and a trophy at the end, right?
Exactly. Like, be engaged with this process. So even today, I get some clients that come to me and they believe I'm going to be this really hyper, micromanaging type coach because they want to shut their brain off. And I'm like, that's not me. I'm going to make you engage with the process. I'm going to make you think, because also it's your body. And at the end of the day, you're going to have some insights into this process that I don't have. I don't know how you feel when you wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, if you feel beat to hell, I'm going to need to have you make some judgment calls about what that training is going to look like today. I can start you with a base plan, kind of like football, basketball, you name it. The coaches draw up a play, which is the program. But then at the end of the day, the athlete has to improvise within that plan based on the situation that unfolds.
Makes perfect sense. I'd have to imagine it would make an athlete less emotional when you understand the process. Like, hey, yes, it's okay that you feel cold and shaky right now. Like, that's totally natural. You don't need to freak out. Just follow the play, and you understand it because we've had these conversations. I have to imagine those instances are a lot less.
Yes, yeah, and I build people. You know what I mean? Because it's like, when I say all this, I'm not expecting a 21-year-old that's gone through one prep to operate at that level. You know what I mean? There's a lot more discussion that takes place, and there are times where there are hard talks that I'll be like, okay, it's time to show this guy what being a professional looks like. Because the thing is, like, sometimes guys that are younger and girls, they get to this point where they become really pro focused. I want this pro card. I want this pro card. Whereas I'm like, you really become a professional before you get the pro card, and then you become pro worthy, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Yeah. So you become a professional, and then you are pro worthy, and then the reward comes. And I think as a coach, you kind of need to remember the level of the person you're coaching, and you teach them what pro worthy looks like. And then it shows in their physique. They do it in their actions first, and then it creates the physique that is pro worthy. And then there's the acknowledgement of the pro worthy status, if that makes sense.
Yeah. People just want to jump to the end a little bit, is I want to be a pro, and then I'll start doing the work. It's like, no. We have to do the work. We have to follow professional habits of being detail-oriented, showing up on time, doing the things you're supposed to do. And those are the things that equal a pro, not just I really want it badly.
Yeah. And it's, it is interesting. I try to also, because I was a basketball player, I try to think in my head. When I'm coaching somebody, I'm like, what level is this person at? Are they the equivalent of a fifth grade basketball player? You know what I mean? Like, do I have to start with the basics? If they're at the level of a fifth grade basketball player, I'm going to kind of treat them with that level. Like, my fifth grade basketball coach was like, I don't want to see you guys shooting threes. You know what I mean? Like, let's start working on the basics, dribbling, passing, layups, mid-range. And it's kind of the same way. I do much more micromanaging when somebody's newer to the sport. And it's also funny because a lot of my more advanced people that sign up that are more advanced in their career, they think because they're higher, I'm going to do more micromanaging, more detail in their plan. But the truth is I do less.
I was going to say, it's probably the other way.
It is because the younger athletes, the newbies, I read a study one time where they had newer trainees try to rate their RPE level,
Oh,
and
oh God.
they told the newer trainees to do perform something like a RP 9 or 9.5. I might be butchering the exact details, but I do remember they had them perform the set at what they thought was a 9 or 9.5, and then they had them go to failure, and they got like 7 more reps. And so they don't know, and so. But the more advanced trainees, I give fewer details when they think they're going to get more because I'm like, okay, you're going to have to take some ownership of what this process looks like and then communicate with me what you're adjusting as we go so then I can help hone your skills of making those judgment calls. When basketball players, like I said, LeBron James, for example, his coaches, Michael Jordan, you name it, Steph Curry, they make the calls, they take their shots during the game, but then after the game, the coach is like, let's talk about that shot you took. Was it a good shot? Was it a bad shot? Were there better options that could have unfolded, and then they learn to make the better judgment calls along the line. The coaches are great for recalibration for high level athletes.
That makes sense. I've always kind of looked at it a little bit like people will have a number of years put into the sport or whatever endeavor they're trying to do. If that's weight loss, you might have been trying to lose weight for 10 years, but all right, how successful have you been and how long have you been seriously pursuing it? Or weight training. All right, I've been in the gym working out for the last 20 years. All right, how much of that has actually been serious, detail-oriented work? You might have really only been serious in the gym for the last 6 months. So I imagine you have to kind of meet that person a lot where they're at, just based off of that. But I feel like that's just like what makes a good coach. And that brings me to my next, my first question, I suppose. In your opinion, what makes a good coach great?
First off, I think you need to know what your goals are. Sometimes coaches get really, really focused on what their clients' goals are, but I think it's also important to know what kind of coach you are because I think there can be some versatility and some versatility developed, but usually great coaches have some sort of specialty. And so, I found that I tend to not do well with, not great with non-competitors because once again, I tend to be very competitively focused and pushing that progress. And so sometimes I don't relate to them on the highest level where it's like, you're just trying to maintain and hold that balance through a period of time where I'm like, I probably overwhelm them. And so I think a great coach can know what their goals are. Do I want to be great in this area or that area? And what do I want out of my clients? And then you got to try to find a way to meld that with what your clients want out of this process because they come to you having things that they want and they do sometimes, actually oftentimes, a poor job of knowing what the cost of that is. Then whether that is a lifestyle client or an athlete or whatever, they have this idea of what it will cost. But then it's usually different from what they've imagined in their head, and then you need to try to reconcile that. And then in addition to that, you need to then blend that together with the technical skills. I do a presentation, a seminar that I sometimes do when I travel or get hired to speak, and it is like, what does the craft of coaching look like? And it is a craft because it's a craft, and I was guilty of this when I first started too, because you get into it. And when you're obsessed with fitness, right? You're obsessed with fitness or bodybuilding or athletics, and you think, I want to learn everything about diet and training. And then you're like, okay, it's a lot more than just diet and training. I was poor at communicating with my clients when I first started coaching. So my clients that were hyper passionate about diet and training, they would thrive because I didn't have to convince them to do what I needed them to do. But then I was like, oh, everybody's not like me. I need to learn how other people think. And so it's like, you need to learn the science of diet and training. You need to learn the real life logistics of diet and training. You need to learn the psychology of why people do what they do.
That psychology is huge, I find. Like just from differentiating someone that's going to get some results for people and be able to get many, it's just, do you understand the motivations of why that person did it? Because it wasn't that they just sabotaged themselves for shits and giggles. It's no. There was a complex chain of emotional decisions they made that equaled that pint of Haagen-Dazs last night.
Yeah. Perfectly said. And it's like, it's this thing, it started at some point in that day when they ate the Haagen-Dazs. And so it's usually not a diet change that needs to happen. It's something about the way they are thinking or managing their day or something along those lines. So there's like logistical and psychological skills you need to develop. And there's, you can go into so many skills that need to develop. And when you start coaching, you don't have all of these skills. Like it's frequently, there have been times in my career 10 years ago, 12 years ago, where I had a client do well and I posted up their picture and I think I was proud of what I did. I was like, man, I did good work here. And then it's funny now, 12 years later, I'll look at the photos and remember what I did with them and I think I could do much better now because I've honed more skills. I've added more skills to my toolbox. To be honest with you, the seminar presentation I do, it's like a 2.5 hour thing where it's all the skills. What I almost treat it like a checklist. Okay, like if you want to be a great coach, here's what you need to learn. Here's what you need to learn, and I go down the list, and it's like, if you've only been coaching 5 years, you're not going to be proficient in all of these things. Just because continue to strengthen yourself and become proficient in as many as you can before your time is up.
That makes perfect sense. Good comment on that, I think. But one of the things that I'll do with coaching my clients up is we talk about it like diet skills. It's a skill to be able to eat out and be able to stay on diet while still eating out. That's a skill. Or a skill to be able to travel whilst you're, about be gone for 2 weeks and still be on diet. When you first start, you're not going to stay on diet when you're 2 weeks on the road. This is not going to happen. Just accept it, do the best you can, and it's okay. We'll miss the mark a little bit. Love that.
That is a great point. And skills, that's actually one of them. Like, it's a set of skills. If it were as simple as handing over the diet and training program, everybody's client would be ripped and jacked and, all that. And
There'd be no coaching profession. We wouldn't have jobs.
You just publish it in a magazine and there you go. You know what I mean? And it's like, you are absolutely right. Those skills are so important. And sometimes I'll have clients, particularly newer to this process, right? They're like, well, I went out to eat and I gained 4 pounds. I thought I was being good with my food, but apparently not. And they're like, I just won't ever do that again. And I'm like, no, because if you never do it again, you're never going to develop that skill. And I said, all you do is think about what you ate. It was too much, right? It was too much. Think about what you ate. Think about how you felt when you ate it. Do less next time. Let's zero in on this mark. Not just, I'll just avoid that forever. Oh, you're never going to go out to eat for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
But it creates a psychology thing too. So you almost have to meet that and go, hey, chill, relax. We're going to have to figure out a way to get you to think ahead of time, be forward thinking with making food choices. And you got to teach all those little skills to people. It's so much harder than giving someone their macronutrients and say, hey, go ahead in that direction. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. And it's a lot of discussions. And a lot of back and forth with trying to hone those skills and even just willpower skills too. A perfect example, I had a client where he was in prep and he just gave me a heads up and he'd been with me for a while. And he was like, hey, I'm feeling particularly run down. Like I'm headed towards a point where I might just get sick or something like that. And I said, okay, let's add, and this is where I was also kind of seeing what he would choose to, because I do sometimes, but I was like, let's add 80 extra grams of carbs tonight. See how you feel when you wake up in the morning, go from there. And I was like, he woke up in the morning, he goes, I feel much better. My weight didn't increase at all. I really needed it. Thanks. And I was like, what foods did you choose? And he goes, I did about 40 grams of carbs from oatmeal and 40 grams of carbs from like kiwis and berries. And I was like, that's not a newbie decision. Do you know what I mean? Like that's
that's quality.
I'm like, that is an experienced fitness competitor, that has the willpower. I give him 80 grams of carbs and he didn't be like, what can I fit in here? What kind of junk food? He went for high quality foods and willpower skills.
What, one donut later? Oh, you failed that test.
Yeah, I was impressed, but somebody who's only been training, honestly, if you to somebody that's been training 4 or 5 years, they're like, what are you talking about? I've been doing this forever, but somebody that's only been training 4 or 5 years probably isn't going to make that decision.
No,
they will.
I feel like we expect ourselves to be so much further along that like the time we spend in it, it's not 4 or 5 years of you just only doing that thing. It's 4 or 5 years of you having a hobby in the background that, yeah, you might give it a lot of focus, but that's still a secondary activity at best.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite sayings is, and I don't know who's at first. I've tried to find it, but it seems like it's attributed to like 4 or 5 different people. Maybe you can go forth and tell people I said it first now.
But I got you. We'll coin it.
It says something like the average person or most people underestimate what they can do in 1 year, overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And it is so true.
Oh yeah.
Most people don't stick with a thing for 10 years, and they'd be surprised at how good they can get in 10 years.
That's perfect. We will coin that as the Cliff Wilson original.
All right.
I will knife fight anyone that says it came from somebody else.
It just came to me, in fact. It just came to me.
It's an inspiration, truly. Now, I got another question for you. So, every trainer at one point in time has to unlearn some habits, whether that's the big one is showing up late and unprepared, little things like that. But I want to know, in your 12 years as working as a coach, it's 12, right?
Actually, it's like 15 now.
Oh,
Crazy.
my God.
Yeah.
All right.
Fun.
Well then. Anyway, 15 years of being a coach. Have you had to unlearn any habits or kind of break some bad things that you've done that have been hurting clients or given a less than great experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say there's two things I would say. First off, the unlearning is that knowing when to push someone to an extreme and when not to.
Mm.
Earlier in my career, I was like, the best way is the best way is the best way, and we're just going to go for it. But if somebody's a first-time competitor, and this is where I sometimes will use my words to soften them to what I'm about to say, is that sometimes if I have a first-time competitor, male, female, whatever, I could pull off those last 4 pounds, but they usually have so little muscle, it may not even make a difference in their placing, but it would make them hate the experience. It would be a bad experience, and they would come away from the prep totally wrecked, and mentally, and I might drive them out of the sport, or at the very least they're not going to have a positive view of the sport. And so usually it used to be 10 years ago, I would just be like, come on, let's keep digging, where I'm like, you look great for your first show, and
Take the win.
yeah, and I'll be like, you look great, because honestly, first-time competitors, unless they're some sort of genetic freak, usually they're not going to be winning their first show. And also, usually the disparity between fourth place and third place at an amateur first-time level show it's pretty wide. Usually it's not even going to make that difference,
It's significant.
And
Yeah, you're not going to be 4 pounds away from placing versus, hitting a, last place or being the person that doesn't make the second call out.
yeah, yeah. And so, I have gotten to the point where if I don't think it's going to make a difference in someone's placing, but it might drive them out of the sport or give them a negative view of the sport because it was too hard for them at this level, I will say, you look great for your first show. You seem like you're hitting a point of really struggling. Let's add some food back in, fill out a little bit, because we can improve our look a little bit that way too. Fill out a little bit, and I will take better care of their mental well-being in that situation. And then I start to get them excited about the future, because, there's the psychology aspect. There is such a thing as ego depletion, and it's like willpower can only be stretched so thin, and I don't want to break someone's willpower the first time I coach them to their first show. I want to give them a positive experience where they pushed themselves to their limit, and then right at that limit, and then backed off just enough to where they'll be even stronger the next time. And I improved that quite a bit over the years because I realized it was a big flaw of mine early on in coaching.
Understanding breaking points of athletes and understanding what the cost of going forward will be. Even though it is technically better, it's still giving an athlete a terrible experience, and then they never want to compete again or do something even worse, binge eat post and just put 50 pounds back on.
Yeah, yeah. And it's and it's funny in my head early on in my career, because I've always taken my job as a coach seriously in terms of getting people the results they're after. And so I was like, let's get this, let's push, let's push. And so if I'm taking better care of their mental well-being, I've also always said I take the long game. I continually tell my clients, I want you to have a great career, not just one great season. I mean, I think we've all seen people that have actually done quite well for a season, and then they just we've seen it where also people have been reckless with PEDs or other aspects, and they wreck their mind or their body, right? And then they aren't able to pick themselves up off the floor, to do it again. And so I would say I want you to have a great career, not just a great season. And so I really got serious about am I setting these people up for a great career to where they're going to get better every time out? And so it took me a good, 5 years maybe of coaching to realize that doesn't just apply to the physical, because I would guard their physicality. If I caught signs that their body was becoming unhealthy or whatever, I would always take care of that. But I realized that the mental side of that is equally as important in making sure I take care to have them set up for a good career, not just a good season. And I catch myself and kind of go along those lines of habits and stuff like that. At the end of every year, I kind of put myself through an audit. What worked? What didn't? What are the foundations about myself that I feel kind of got me to where I am today? Have I strayed from those at all this year? Do I need to get back to those? And then what are some good habits I may have developed and bad habits? And then what do I need to work on going forward? And so I kind of do a good week long reflection on myself at the end of the year. Like what kind of year was it, and what kind of scorecard would I give myself in terms of how I performed as a coach? And then I try to, it keeps me on track because I think it is easy to pick up bad habits along the way as well.
I think it's very easy as a coach, especially when you start working with larger sums of clients, to get lost in the weeds, to go, well, all right, I had 100 clients succeed, but yeah, these 50 didn't make it across the finish line. Whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it's so easy to fall into that. So doing things like audits and going back through, it's like, all right, that client failed. Yeah, we could sit here and say that person didn't have good self-control, discipline, didn't want it enough, all those fun things that make us as coaches feel better. But that person still didn't get where they were trying to go. In their mind, we failed them. So doing that audit, I think, is huge.
Yeah. And you nailed it too. So I do sometimes like mentor coaches, and one thing I'll usually say is sometimes I'll find younger coaches will be like, I had this client, they failed and they complain. I'm like, keep in mind their failure, just the same way their success is your success, their failure is also your failure. And they'll say, well, they didn't want it enough or whatever. But sometimes I'll say, okay, so one thing I try to get to the heart of is, are our goals aligned with a client and a coach? So if our goals are aligned, so they say they want this thing, right? I want this thing, I want this physique, and I say, here's the cost of that thing. Same way you would, if you're selling a car, right? You're a car salesman. Somebody comes to you and says, I want this car. And you say, this car costs this much. And they say, I don't have that much. And you're like, oh, sorry, that doesn't work. You know what I mean? And maybe you can point them to a cheaper car or something like that. So sometimes clients will come to me and they'll say, I want this thing. Usually it's to step on stage. And I say, it costs this much. And they're like, that's too much, right? I can't do that. And usually in that case, like I told you, even in an earlier part of my career, I'd be like, let me refer you to a coach that I think is a little more aligned to what you're after. So in that case, I don't really view myself or them as failing, right? Because they wanted something different. And so I set them along the path where they'll get it. I don't feel like I failed. But when a client says they want this and I say it costs this much and they say, I'm prepared for that, but they still can't get it together, that's also my failure as well as theirs. Because while they failed to execute and get it done, I failed to, whether it be make a plan that was executable for them or going into the psychology, whatever string of words needed to be said or they needed to hear, I failed to find that string of words. Because I think that for people that truly do want it, there is a string of words or a perspective that needs to be said, or imparted, and it's about finding it for that person. And sometimes as a coach, you fail to find those right string of words.
I agree with that. Or we didn't build the expectation properly. We didn't explain the cost enough. There's a million different things, and it's part of what makes coaching so hard. And again, it's a tradescraft, like you said, is that we always have to be finding new ways to dig deeper, new ways to get more out of people and explain all of these things. Because, success is ours, sure, but failure is also ours. I love that.
Take that responsibility, and because it's real easy as a coach to be like, well, I'm coaching all these great athletes, I'm doing a great job, but then like take no ownership for the people that drop off or don't look great on stage or whatever it may be. And it's like, no, that's yours too. You own all of it,
It's not as pervasive as it used to be. At least I don't believe it is. But like the crash dieters, that used to take these massive plans, and 300 people signed up, 200 of them couldn't make it past the month, but man, those 100 look like they did okay.
Yeah. The only thing I will say is like the only situation where I think that you don't have to take responsibility for it is where like sometimes I know a lot of coaches complain about this where they'll start somebody up and like within the first week, the person just kind of either they drop off or just disappear in general. And it's like, okay, this person didn't even give you a chance. Do you know what I mean? To like work your magic, which is frustrating as a coach. But that would be the only situation where I'd be like, all right, you couldn't have done anything about that.
That's a pass, man. You're good.
Yeah.
All that. Okay. I got one more question for you. And it's kind of interesting because I just having heard your story getting involved in coaching. So there's a thing in coaching, especially bodybuilding, where you get a lot of underqualified coaches that don't have the requisite experience taking people to stage. Which, as you know, more than most people in the world, getting that stage lean, especially going after a pro card or in the pursuit of one, is another level of lean. So what are your thoughts on, we'll say, uneducated or unqualified coaches entering the space of bodybuilding? Especially since, in kind of a way, that's sort of what you did, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, you are absolutely right. And there were times early on where I didn't know if I had business doing what I was doing because everybody else was highly educated when I started coaching. And so when they were highly educated, I was like, should I even be doing this? And, actually my dad was pretty helpful, pretty interesting because my dad is a PhD plant pathologist. And,
all right. That's a little fun history fact of Cliff. Okay.
Yeah, he's a PhD plant pathologist. He's a scientist, and one thing he gave me some good advice is like, hey, if you know what you're doing and just try to be very aware of what you don't know and be cautious that you'll be fine. Because he was also telling me when he was younger, he went to a scientific plant pathology conference where there was some of the leading scientists in the field presenting their findings and their studies and their presentations. And he said, then this guy got up who was not a scientist. I think he had like his bachelor's in business, but he had worked in the business of plants, right, for many years. And he got up there and he said that this guy wowed the audience he presented what he had observed over the years regarding certain, plant matters, I guess, not my field, clearly.
The business of plants. I got you.
Business of plants, seed breeding and things of that nature. And he would say things like, I suspect this is going on, right? I suspect this is why we're observing this. I theorize this is why this is happening. And my dad said that this room of PhDs was blown away by his observations, his theories. And he said over the next 20 years that the people in the crowd went on to test his theories and a lot of it was true. And I was like, I could be that guy. You know what I mean? And it's funny because I have always just tried to observe, possibly explain. And it's funny because I have had that happen where I've had people consult with me on studies and they're like, this might be happening, what you said. So, but I think when it comes to entering the space, one of the problems I often see is that some of the people that have educated themselves, they're so nervous about being called out for not being qualified that they hesitate to enter the space. And then you get people that, they've given no thought to what they know and what they don't. And they just like, contact me for coaching. I don't think that there is any good way to filter that out. I think it's really just going to have to be the people that know what they're talking about discussing what good coaching looks like and what bad coaching looks like so that the consumer can be more diligent, because sometimes the loudest people are the least qualified. And I think we see that particularly in the social media space. And it is tough to differentiate the two, because also I even know some people with high level degrees online that give terrible advice, in my opinion, like not great advice. So I think it's just one of those things where I think you just need to be honest with yourself about where you're at. And then the other thing too is like, what are you charging and what is your level of clientele? Because when I was charging $30, I wasn't trying to compete with some of the coaches that were $300 per month, because I didn't think I was that good at their level.
You think you had the qualification or the caliber of skill set quite yet to be able to charge that type of money?
Yeah, because honestly, if I was charging as much as someone at the start of my coaching career, someone that had their PhD and had 10 years of competing experience, I would kind of be a fraud. You know what I mean? I would be a fraud because I'm like charging, I'm saying, with my price point, I'm saying my value is every bit as good as this guy's, when I knew it wasn't. But I was going to say, if you want quality coaching that maybe you don't have to pay as much, and I do know more than you, then it's a win-win, right? Because I'm still providing a good service for a good price, and I'm helping them get farther than they would have on their own. So it's like, I think, I talked to a young coach one time and he was trying to charge, he was 19 years old, had only been lifting 2 years and was trying to charge $325 a month. And he was like, I feel like I know all the diet and training stuff. I just need to know the business stuff. And I was like, man, like,
you poor soul.
Like someone like, yeah, I'm like, that's a real lack of self-awareness, because there's a lot of diet and training stuff where I'm still curious and I'm like, there are certain things I still am like, I do this, but there's a possibility this other thing may be better. And I'm always second guessing my choices because there might be better ones out there. And some people say that's humility, but I actually say it's ego. I want to be right so badly. I'll change my mind at the second there's evidence in front of me, you know?
It's like the experts, quote unquote, in the space, right? You go look at the people like the Lane Norton or Dr. Eric Helms or Dr. Brad Schoenfeld around hypertrophy, like number one in the world in research in hypertrophy. Guy still goes into things like, we think this might be this way, but we don't know yet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
and
how learned people speak.
exactly. And so, it's funny, the three names that you just named. So I still don't have my college degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I'm self-directed, self-educated, and I've spoken at a lot of conferences, even with those three guys. They have PhDs in their field, and my specific niche is bodybuilding. And I do know a lot about the human body, and it's kind of funny because like there was a time I remember at one conference where I was speaking with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, and I can't even remember the question, but I remember I was asked a question I just frankly didn't know. And I said, that's not exactly my area of expertise. It was something mechanistically relevant to training, but it really didn't apply directly. It didn't apply directly to what I do. Does that make sense? And I just said, that might be a better question for, Brad Schoenfeld, because that's really his department. And it's like, I think another thing is like just getting comfortable saying, I don't know, because nobody knows anything. Like you said, a lot of those guys, they've also said things where, I think this is going on, but I just don't know. And it's like, I think getting comfortable saying that, I would be aware of somebody that you just feel like they always have an answer for everything, even if it's not even in their wheelhouse whatsoever.
Oh, dude, 100%. And I think that's something, especially with trainers and coaches as well. So many people come to us because they know nothing, or they feel they know nothing. And then going to somebody who's supposed to have all the answers, you almost wear this bulletproof vest of having the answer, being right. And that's why people come to you. That's what builds your ability to coach. So I understand why coaches and trainers don't want to say, I don't know, but my God, does that qualify you as a professional just to say the magic words of, well, I actually don't know the answer to that. Let me go figure it out, or go ask the colleague next to me because he does know.
Yeah. And I think knowing what you don't know is every bit as important knowing what you know, and having the having the ability to just admit when you messed up. Funny side story, one time I was early in my career, I had a client at a pro show. It was one of my earlier pros, and he was competing in the same show as the current reigning natural bodybuilding world champion. And I remember backstage I was like, man, the world champion looks off. It wasn't the world championships, it was just a qualifier show.
Yeah.
And he looked off, and I was like, man, we might have a chance here, and my client's pumping up and he looks really great, and I look at the world champ, his name was Cleveland Thomas at the time, and Cleveland Thomas is curling, he's looking at my client, and he goes, man, your stuff came together nice, and he goes, mine did not. They hadn't even gone out yet, and he was just like, that's like a real world champ. He's like,
that's 100% a world champ. Someone that's just going, this one might not be the win. I'm going to get out there, do my reps, get a little better.
Yeah, he still won. But he goes, and he still won. He comes back in, and he looks at me, and he goes, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I deserve that one. And he just goes, whoo, and he just goes and sits down, and I'm like, man, somebody that is accomplished, they're comfortable in their skin. You know what I mean? Like when they know what they know, and he's like, he goes, I tried something different this peak week. He goes, I'm never going to do that again. Just move on to the next one.
Dude, I love that. I love the humility. I love all of what you bring here. But I want to open it up a little to you. I know who you are, but Cliff, what do you have going on, and just where can people find you?
Instagram's kind of the main place that, I'm available really out in the world. But my Instagram's CW Team Wilson. But for the most part, these days I'm coaching, and I'm working on a few side projects that should be launching probably in the next month or two here. I don't want to put it out there, but one of the things I've been working on is my coaching has always been really exclusive. I don't take on all the people that apply to work with me because I don't have room. Also, I've had nothing for non-competitors for years. It's just, working with competitors, and I get a lot of people. So I think I'm finally going to have something coming out that will be able to help everybody that is serious about training, and kind of let them, because I wrote a book some years back that was a bodybuilding book, but that doesn't really help gen pop people because it was so bodybuilding specific. If you're a lifestyle person, and that even applies, it doesn't even always apply to the person that's like really serious in the gym. So I have a couple of projects coming out that I've been working on that will be able to like kind of take what I use for my high level bodybuilders and what I've done with them in terms of training and diet, and then just make it more palatable and usable for the people that are serious about training but don't want to get up on stage in their underwear, right?
Don't want to subsist on a diet of tilapia and broccoli. I got you. Picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, yeah, not everybody's once again, not everybody's family is as understanding of us people that want to get up there and in our underwear and have people judge our bodies, right? It's most people's nightmare.
It is an interesting choice. I mean, I've been competing now for almost 10 years, and yeah, my dad still doesn't understand that. No.
Yeah, yeah. One of my friends, he started out as a client, and then we just got along really well, and we've been friends for almost 10 years now, and he lives in Austria, and we kind of laugh. We're like, could you imagine trying to explain to somebody from 1,000 years ago, like how we became friends halfway across the world? We're like, yeah, we like to lift heavy things and get on stage in our underwear.
Get oiled up and get on stage in front of an underwear in front of an audience. They might think you're doing something different, but I'm not here to judge, Cliff.
Hey, to each their own.
Love it, my man. I appreciated having you on. We'll definitely have you on for some more content in the future, but we'll stick around and we can end the episode here. But good times.